Good morning, Vietnam. It's another day, another dawn. Another day to get out there and just sing that song, baby. We're back with the Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Beauty show. Today we're going to be looking at Matt Walsh. We're just going to be looking at him. We're not even going to be doing anything. We're just going to stare at him. We're going to be reacting to Matthew Walsh on the Rogan show. Recently, and by recently I mean like a year ago, they talked about marriage. And there's a lot of good things about it, a lot of bad things about it. Mostly the latter, but I love Matt. I like Joe. He's a good guy. But I want to talk about marriage, and they didn't really talk about marriage as I think they should have. We're going to be giving some feedback, some commentary. You know me, as a single man, I know a lot about marriage, but how can you disagree with a man with a suit that matches his wall? Anyways, we're going to be getting right into it. So let's skedoodle, and I'm going to stop saying All right, let's get into it. I'm so excited. I can't wait.
I think of marriage is a certain thing, which is the context for procreation, for the building of the nuclear family.
What about people that get married that don't have kids? Are you opposed to that? What if they get married, they decide, you know what, we don't need kids. I'm going to get fixed. You get your tubes tied. Let's travel the world.
Yes. My solution to that is instead of doing that, just don't.
Well, what do you mean am I opposed to it? I mean, I think that every married couple should be open to life.
But what if they don't want to? Are you opposed to them being married? If marriage is only for procreation and to bond a family together, what about people that are deeply in love that never want to have children?
I don't think it's not only procreation, but that is one of the fundamental definitional aspects of it. Of course, there's more to marriage just than that.
And what about people that are infertile? They fall in love and they realize that they can have babies. And they don't really necessarily want to adopt. Is that okay for them to be married? Because then by definition, marriage falls into a completely different thing. Because then it's a bond of love. It's a union of love.
Sure. I mean, that doesn't change the nature of marriage, though. It's a little bit like I say that. What's the definition of a woman? Well, a woman is someone who by her nature can conceive children in her womb and bear children. And then the response is always, well, what about women who are infertile? Does that destroy your definition of woman? And it doesn't, because it's still a woman's nature to bear children. Not every woman will, and there will be disease and infertility and old age and all these things that will preclude that, but it's still of her nature to do so. And I would say the same thing for marriage. I mean, it is natural in a marriage for procreation to occur. It's not always going to happen in reality, though, but that's still one of the natural functions of marriage. And married couples who can't conceive children, there are other ways to be parents, like adoption, for example.
If they want to.
So that whole thing doesn't really make much sense to me. Because if I'm trying to figure out what is a dog, I'm not going to say, well, a dog barks, because now I'm talking about what a dog does. That doesn't make any sense. And marriages, people produce, but that's not what makes it a marriage. The same way a dog barks, but if a dog is mute, is it suddenly not a dog? This is the thing, where they're talking about what marriage does instead of what marriage is. You're not going to be able to talk about what marriage is unless you reach towards the transcendent, which is going to be evident in the end here.
Right, but if people want to be married and don't want to ever have children, are you opposed to them being married?
Well, I wouldn't advocate a law that would prevent it.
But would it change the definition of what their marriage is to you because they don't want to have a family? They just want to have a loving bond?
I think this would be a couple that is rejecting one of the fundamental aspects of marriage, and they should be open to life. I would hope that in the future they would be, but
isn't that just a personal choice? I mean, you can have a very fulfilling life if you just follow your pursuits, dreams, and your interests, and you find someone that shares those interests with you, and you share time together. It's very fulfilling and loving.
Yeah, it's a personal choice, in that I'm not advocating for like a law that says that you if you're married you have to have X number of kids.
But then why are you opposed to two gay people doing that?
Well, because again, it's not about choice. It's about what this institution, marriage as an institution, and what is it, and what purpose does it serve? And I do not agree with tearing down or changing this definition, especially because the people who have changed the definition haven't come up with a new one. So they say, well, that's not what marriage is. So for thousands of years, we said marriage is the procreative union. And then we had the other side who came along and said, well, it's not that. Okay, well then, like, what is it exactly? And I know you said, well, it's people who love each other. Two people love each other. Well, but then why two people? Why do they have to love each other? All these kinds of questions. You get into what if they're in the same family? What if brothers and sisters want to marry? And I know every time that comes up, the advocates for gay marriage will say, well, that's a slippery slope argument. That's a fallacious. But it's actually not. It's like we're trying to get to what do you even think this institution is now, since you've rejected out what we were saying it was. And I've never found a compelling definition.
I think that's a good argument. I just don't know why he's using it, because you could say the same thing about all those things he just listed. If his definition is marriage is the procreative union, the capacity to have kids, then you could say the same thing with a cousin or a sister or many women. I mean, wouldn't more women be more valuable? See, that's the thing, is that marriage is not about the procreative union alone. That's one of the outcomes of marriage, but that's not the prime telos, the prime purpose of marriage. The purpose of marriage is far beyond that. Because they are serving that highest purpose, which I'll get into later, then an offspring of love happens. But yeah.
And any definition offered, it's like, well, what's even the point then? Why do we even need this now?
I just don't see how a gay marriage in any way damages a straight marriage. I don't see it at all. It doesn't make any sense to me. It just seems to me that people want to be look, if you wanted to look at logic, especially in our modern society, which is pretty when it comes to relationships, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 50% of all marriages end in divorce anyway. They don't make it. I don't know if anything would damage marriage and damage the institution of marriage is the option of divorce. I don't think gay people and gay people getting married in any way, shape, or form changes a bond that you have with your wife. It's just called marriage. It's a human invented thing. If we decide that gay people can get married too, I just don't see how it damages anything.
Again, it's not a human invented thing. If you're going to say that marriage is something, it has to have boundaries. It has to be framed. Everything that has meaning is framed. This is the thing. If you start saying that anything can enter into this framework, then it's not a framework anymore. And that's the whole thing of what I think Matt is trying to get to, but I don't know if they're going about it the right way. Marriage is not a human invented thing. And even if it was, then it will only remain human, or it will only remain marriage if everything doesn't start flowing into it. There has to be a separation. Otherwise, it loses its definitional capacities. If a definition includes every word in the dictionary, then it's not a definition anymore.
I don't think it tears down the definition of marriage in any way. It just opens up the possibility that people who are gay won't be discriminated against.
Yeah, I don't think that a gay couple existing directly impacts. There's a gay couple and wherever, and I'm with my wife in our house. Like, obviously, right. There's not. But I'm not talking about on the individual level. I'm talking about on the societal level.
Right.
I would agree that divorce, especially this no-fault divorce, rampant divorce, I don't think it's as high as 50%. I know that's often quoted. I'm not sure where that comes from, but it is high. It's too high. And
Chris Rock has a great joke about that. He said those are just the people with the courage to get out. It's like, how many cowards stay?
But it's also true that
hilarious.
The advocates for what we call now traditional marriage, which I just call marriage, but the advocates for traditional marriage put themselves at a disadvantage by especially in the churches, like allowing this rampant divorce to occur, and then you've already sort of given up on some marriage is supposed to be monogamous and permanent, as well as procreative. Well, you've given up monogamy and permanence, and so now it's not. That's two of the three legs gone, and so now this assault was waged on the procreative part of it. and it was difficult to withstand it because the institution had already been weakened. So I agree with you there. But my answer to that is to try to reinforce what marriage is, not to just give up on it entirely. And I still think you're left with this question of, like, if marriage is not what I'm saying it is, then why do we even need it? What's the point? I mean, you're saying it's a man-made institution.
Yes.
But you're also, like, the way that you're presenting it, it's a totally meaningless institution. So they don't need it at all.
No, it's not meaningless. It's because it means something to the people that get married.
So it's just a subjective, symbolic thing. I mean, what?
Yeah.
So if you're
kind of what it is. Look, there's a massive responsibility when you're married and when you have children to keep your family together and you raise and keep everybody happy and healthy. And there's great reward to that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't always work out. It's people change. People are up. It doesn't always work. And so I don't think it should be outlawed because 50% of the people fall apart. Just like I don't think it has any effect whatsoever on a straight couple if a gay couple decides that they want to make it official. And that's what it is to them. It gives them a feeling that they're accepted and appreciated and that they're not discriminated against because they happen to be homosexual.
Again, if you're just going to say that it's a feeling, you're just going to say that it's completely subjective, which, I mean, subjective, objective, they're not really useful categories anyways. You're just going to say that, then perhaps it doesn't have any meaning. If it's meaning that you create, I mean, do you really have any capacity to create meaning? You can think that this thing is meaningful, but you don't. I mean, this is the thing, is that if I wanted to say a $1 bill means $100, it doesn't really matter what I say. It matters what everyone accepts. And if not everyone is going to accept a definition of marriage that is cohesive, then the boundaries of marriage perhaps don't fall apart, but people begin to call something marriage which isn't actually marriage. And that's exactly the problem here, is that you have marriages that are people marrying themselves, people marrying 2 men, 2 women, multiple if you're a Mormon. There's a lot of definitional breakdowns when you start to introduce these other capacities, and when you say it's completely about a feeling, well, then there's really no point in talking about it at all. I mean, who cares about what you have to say about marriage if it's all subjective, if it's all relative, really is what he's saying. So, that doesn't make much sense to me.
So, well, what you're articulating to me is the damage that's done by gay marriage to the institution of marriage.
But how is it done? How is that in any way damaged straight people?
Because we are making the institution meaningless.
But it's not meaningless.
Well, but
it's very meaningful to the people that have it.
Subjective, symbolic, and it's about your own personal feelings.
Isn't it, though?
Well, no, I would say that it's not.
Well, if it's not subjective and it's not symbolic,
it codifies and protects and gives a name to a thing that actually exists, which are man, woman couples creating people, creating babies,
but not always.
Right, but that's still the nature of the union. So,
but what are the percentage of people today that are married that don't have children? I bet it's pretty high amongst heterosexuals.
Probably.
Is there something wrong with that?
I think there is something wrong with that. I think there is something wrong with getting married and saying, oh, we're not going to have any kids at all.
But why is there something wrong with that? If someone's personal choice,
well,
why is it wrong that 2 people are like, I am deeply committed to work and I don't want to sacrifice any of my career and I don't want to ruin a kid because I'm constantly at the office, but that's where I get deep satisfaction and that's what I'm focused on. And the woman says, that's great because I don't want children either. I really am attached to my interests in my career and what I like to do. That's not damaging your relationship with your wife and your family. I certainly don't think of it as a threat to my marriage or my family.
Yeah, it is a personal choice.
Right, but shouldn't people be allowed to make those personal choices? Like, isn't that a fundamental aspect of what it means to be American, to have that freedom?
Well, but right now we're not talking about what people are allowed to do. I'm not saying
we're talking about marriage, gay marriage.
Okay, we were just discussing straight couples who choose not to have kids.
That's also a personal freedom issue,
right.
Isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm not saying that straight couples should be legally required to have kids. But if you're asking me, Do I think it's the right choice to just get married and choose not to have kids ever? I do not think that that's the right choice. It's their choice, but people can make choices that are wrong. And you can disagree.
But how is it wrong if they have a fulfilling and wonderful life together with that choice? If their thing is that they just want to have a bond between the two of them to just like take it to the next level, let everybody know like we are married. If I die, my money's going to go to Helen. And if Helen dies, I'm going to mourn her because she was my wife and now I'll be a widower. Like to some people, that distinction gives them peace and security and makes them feel better about the relationship, that they're both so committed that they've legally signed documents that say that they're bound by law and under the eyes of God or whatever you believe in.
Yeah. They're able to make that choice, but I think you're still rejecting one of the purposes of marriage. And in the scenario that you just outlined, you're also deciding to live a really self-centered life. You're saying,
what if you're not? What if your work is very charitable? What if it benefits humanity in a deep way? What if you spend a lot of time doing, healthcare work and social work, and you're deeply committed to your community? It's not selfish at all. You're just dedicating your time to something other than raising new human beings. But you're dedicating your life to enhancing other human beings that are around you.
That's a hypothetical.
It is a hypothetical, but so is yours, right?
Yeah, but I think most of the people that choose like we're not going to have kids, and the rate of those rates are declining, and
even if that wasn't a hypothetical, I still think it's wrong because it's like it doesn't have to be either or. You could have kids and still focus on your career, and maybe you don't think that you should be a parent, but no parent thinks that they should be a parent. Everyone's scared. Everyone's terrified. It's a learning process. It's not about you. It's not about what my career is. It's not about what my hobbies are. It's about who am I meant to be and who am I meant to pursue. And that's the more important thing. And maybe your work is like that. And maybe you can't have kids. And maybe adoption isn't an option. We should mourn that as a tragedy instead of saying that that's a choice that people should make.
The age when people first have kids is also going up, and all of that.
Yeah.
Most of the people that are making these choices, I don't think it's because they're involved in charity work. I do think that it is more the scenario you outlined in the first time around, which is just like, well, this is what I'm doing. I have my job. I don't want to give it up.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff.
But don't you think that people should have the freedom to live their life in that way? I think human beings vary widely, in a huge way. And I think there's some human beings that find a very fulfilling life just reading books and traveling and experiencing different things and seeing art and doing whatever they want to do. And they don't necessarily have to have kids to live a fulfilling life that way. And if they choose to do that with someone who they have a loving bond with and who they get married to, I don't think it's a bad thing that they don't want to have kids.
Well, I guess we have to, maybe we're running into a question of now you get to the real fundamental question.
I think it's a fundamental freedom thing.
Yeah, we're not disagreeing, I guess, on the freedom aspect of it, because again, I'm not saying that you should be required to have kids.
But you're imposing your sensibilities and what you think is important in life to other people. But everybody has a different idea of what's important in life without hurting anyone. The thing is, like, what I'm saying is these people that are married, that don't have children, they're not harming anyone. They're not harming these unborn children that they never have. They're not harming anyone. And it doesn't affect your relationship with your family and your marriage at all.
Yeah, but I'm not imposing myself on them or harming them by answering a question about how I feel about their choices.
Right, but nor are gay people doing that to you.
I think the harm comes from, on a societal level, when we start breaking down these basic central institutions like the institution of the family and of marriage. That's where the harm comes from. And the more that people believe, the more that we build a society where it's believed that marriage is objectively meaningless, right? It's entirely subjective. It's just about making you feel better. The more that we build a society like that, I think that's where the harm comes in. The worse it is, and people are going to reject marriage, and that means more. fewer kids are being born. Also, more kids are being born in a context where they don't have that stable family structure. So the harm definitely comes. It may not be this immediate, connect the dots thing, but and we can already see that.
All right, I know someone who's married, so I feel comfortable giving my authoritative stop, my authoritative pass on what marriage actually is, because I know a few people who are married, at least two. They're married to each other, but still, I think it works. Anyways, the NASDAQ is at 1.05%, and that means nothing to me. What is marriage? Where is marriage? How is marriage? Why is marriage? Where is marriage? Only one of those questions we're going to answer. Remember when I said this? You're not going to be able to talk about what marriage is unless you reach towards the transcendent, which is going to be evident in the end here. Yeah, so I think that is exactly where we have to go if you want to ask this question. But one of the comments on the video said, Matt is doing whatever he can not to say because God said so. And I know that comment was made to mock him, but in reality, if Matt just said that, it would have solved a lot more issues, because eventually you have to appeal to the transcendent. Whenever you're talking about matters of meaning, you have to appeal beyond matter, and you have to appeal to what transcends the matter, what gives the matter meaning, what imbues it with significance. And that's exactly what you're doing in this relationship that we're talking about of marriage, which is that it's meant to reflect something way higher than itself. And that's the thing, is that one of the main fallacies of this whole conversation from the very beginning is that they're taking these categories and they're trying to operate just on the lower levels. And you can't actually solve what marriage is on the lower levels. You have to appeal eventually to God. Eventually you have to at least appeal to the forms, to at least appeal to goodness, truth, and beauty, before you can even talk about something which with such significance, and not only significance on that scale, but also historical significance, spatial significance. Marriage has held a place in human society forever, and there's a reason why, because it is not only the bond between a man and a woman that allows for the creation of, and not only the creation, but the environment to have children that flourish, that are fruitful, but also it reflects divinity. And it's one of the main institutions that actually has the ability to reflect divinity. See, here's the secret. Marriage is none of the things that they listed in the video. It's not making it official. It's not the capacity to create a stable environment for your kids. It's not even the loving bond between a man and a woman. Those are manifestations of what marriage is, but that is not what marriage is. Marriage, at its core, is Christ and her church. The capacity for man to be united to God. It is the idea that as king and queen, we join together and create a new kingdom, and we offer that up to God. That is what marriage is. It's a new form of creation. It's the capacity for man to do what he was always meant to do. And it's the environment by which to do that, the structure by which to do that in a loving manner, that produces that love between the man and the woman, that produces the children that come out, that produces the fruitful labor that is marriage. That is what marriage is, in essence. It's a sacrament, it's a mystery that you enter into, and it's an entrance into the kingdom of God. That's what marriage is always meant to be. It is always meant to be talked about within Christianity, because Christ is the fulfillment of marriage. No other religion, no other philosophy, no other worldview can talk about marriage in its totality. They can talk about the fruits of marriage, but they can never talk about what marriage is, because they don't have a true marriage. You only are married within the context of the church. I'm not even saying what is official. Even if a priest does your wedding, that's not what makes you married. What makes you married is whether you have entered into the bridal chamber of Christ together as this new unit, as one flesh. And you are doing that with the hopes of bringing more people into the world, of bringing more image bearers into the world. You are joining together humanity. You are manifesting what humanity was always meant to be. And you are manifesting more of that. It's an abundant love that springs forth from you. Here's another problem with this whole video, is that from the very beginning, they separate these categories. They're operating not from the sacred worldview. And they're even allowing for the division of the sacred and the secular, as if there's a division between God's imprint, his fingerprint in every aspect of reality. You can't ever talk about what marriage is in this secular world. Marriage is not getting a tax break. It's not even everyone else realizing that you're married. It's the entrance into a community that realizes that now you are one flesh, and now you're united to God in a wholly different way. Now you are bearing the image of Christ and her church. When you enter into these divisions, when you allow the fallacy of these divisions of the sacred and the secular, you're never going to be able to talk about it. And that is the issue. That is the fallacy with this whole video, is that Matt, who is a Catholic Christian, is not actually acknowledging the transcendent value of what marriage is. And he's never going to be able to answer that question. No question is going to be satisfactory to Joe. And Joe's not going to receive the answer unless he accepts this idea of the transcendent, not only the idea, but the reality of the transcendent. You will never answer what marriage is, operating from that context. Eventually, you will have to go the step beyond. And this is the same with everything. If you want to answer what anything means, if you want to go beyond the categories of the relative, you have to ascend to the transcendent. You have to say that there is something outside myself, that this institution, this act that I'm doing, this commitment that I am making, is a reflection of. It's not only a reflection of, but a symbol of. Not only a symbol of, but actually contains everything. Actually contains the very thing that is meant to reflect, that is meant to symbolize. That is what marriage is. That's what marriage is always meant to be. And that's not what marriage is, then you aren't even talking about true marriage. You're talking about government's recognition of something which is now deemed official, and now you get tax breaks. Now you created a stable environment for your kids. Perhaps you've done all those things, but that doesn't mean that you're married. Marriage is a commitment of love between Christ and her church, a reflection of Christ's death on the cross and resurrection and life. It is one of the ultimate sacraments that, I say this a lot, permeates all of reality. Many of the things that we do is a marriage. This is the truest form of marriage, the greatest form of marriage, the marriage of God to man, reflected in man to woman. This has been the Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Beauty show. I'm your host, Samuel Hogeman. Please join me next time, hopefully next Friday, but we'll see. All right, take care, cuties.